In this tutorial, we learn the formula for calculating the length of a line segment, which is also the same formula we would use to calculate the distance between 2 points. And to do that, we're going to work through the example that we see here. We're given a line segment with endpoints P and Q. P has coordinates 2, 3, and Q has coordinates 5, 7. And say we need to calculate the length of this line segment PQ. And we'll call that length L. The formula for calculating this length L is the following. It states that the length of the line segment equals to the square root of x2 minus x1 in parentheses squared plus y2 minus y1 in parentheses squared. Now, here's how to actually interpret or read this formula. To begin with, it's important to realize that the numbers on these coordinates are simply there to indicate that we're referring to a different point, meaning the coordinates x1, y1 are the coordinates of one of the two endpoints, and the coordinates x2, y2 are the coordinates of the other endpoint. I tend to always look at the line segment going from left to right, in which case I always call the first point I see point 1 and the second point I see point 2. So looking at this diagram, that would mean that x1, y1 would be the coordinates of point P and x2, y2 would be the coordinates of point Q. In other words, x1 is the x-coordinate of point P, so that would be 2, and y1 would be the y-coordinate of point P, so that would be 3. x2, on the other hand, would be the x-coordinate of point Q, so that would be 5, and y2 would be the y-coordinate of point Q, so that would be 7. Now that we've established what x1, y1, and x2, y2 are, we're in a position to actually use this formula. To do so, let me start by just moving all of this to the side, like so. Now, replacing x1, y1, and x2, y2 by their respective values, we can go ahead and actually calculate the length of this line segment. We can state that the length L equals to the square root of x2 minus x1 in parentheses squared, so that would be 5 minus 2 in parentheses squared. Notice that all I'm doing here is using the values of x1 and x2 that we pointed out earlier. We add to that y2 minus y1 in parentheses squared. So that would be 7 minus 3 squared. We simplify this. That leads us to the square root of 5 minus 2, which is 3 squared, plus 7 minus 3, which is 4 squared. That's equal to the square root of 3 squared, which is 9, plus 4 squared, which is 16. That's the square root of 25. And finally, since the square root of 25 is equal to 5, we have the length L of the line segment equals to 5 units of length. And that's the final answer. And so that's how we can use this formula to calculate the length of any line segment. It's also the same formula that we would use to calculate the distance between any 2 points. Remember that one of the most important things to use this formula properly was to establish which endpoint had coordinates x1, y1, and which one had coordinates x2, y2. Once we've defined the points 1 and 2, we can go ahead and simply plug in their coordinates into this formula and calculate. And that's it for this tutorial.